Hi, everyone. Welcome to the IT Leaders Collaborative. We have a special episode today talking about patching with N-able. So we have our guest, Jason from N-able, who head nerd, who is going to chat with our team, Jeff and Michael from MyTech. So they are really going to be our experts on today's episode to talk through everything patching with N-able. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, whether you're watching live or later on our YouTube. We'd be happy to respond to any questions you have, or we can even send them to Jason. So with further ado, I am going to hand it off to you, Jason, and get going.
Awesome. Thanks, Taryn.
Yeah.
So let's get started with a couple slides. I won't go too deep into slides because we're actually going to do a good show and tell in terms of the software that MyTech uses called N-central. So first and foremost, what we're going to do here is talk about the security landscape. So like in football, defense wins championships. Now, I'm sure you're all familiar that we have things like organized crime, nation state actors, cyber terrorists, insiders, people who are employees at your business, and hacktivists. All of these different personas can make up, the groups that we need to focus on in terms of defending against in your business. So how do we protect ourselves in this brave new world? We do that primarily, and the theme today is really about patch management. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to talk about why patching is so important and so critical. Okay, and as you can see on the screen, 43% of attacks are targeting SMBs. Okay, which is small and medium businesses. Now, if you are a mid-sized enterprise, for example, over 1,000 employees, you're next, right? You're part of that other percentage. 60% of those cyber attacks could have been prevented by one single patch. Okay, so as you're well aware, patching is critical to maintaining your security posture, and you have 15 days on average to patch. Now, I've been patching because I'm an old stalwart for probably well over 25 years. Okay, so I started patching way back in Windows NT, and what I can tell you is patching is the most important step to maintaining security. Okay, it is typically done through your IT operations as opposed to your security operations. So what happens typically is IT ops, so day-to-day L1s, L2s, L3s, what have you, are patching these systems. But then the security team will also, do vulnerability scans to make sure that things are patched. Okay, so you have on average 15 days to get things patched. Now, the important part here is you may be patching once a month, right? And often people do that with servers in terms of change management process. I do not want to cause any downtime. I will patch one time during the month. Unfortunately, you cannot do that anymore, right? You have to have much more flexibility. And let's be honest, security sometimes gets in the way, right? I'm sure you're all familiar with two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication. Sometimes these are painful steps that we have to do to ensure security. So, it's just one of the things that we have to, patch these systems on a weekly basis. So why is patching so complicated? All right. Again, you might have hundreds of devices. You might have 25 devices. At the end of the day, patching can be disruptive, right? We need to reboot the device after a patch. So typically, when you click that little Windows Update button, right, it's going into Microsoft and doing a compare of the library of patches that are installed on your computer, and then going, okay, we have some available for you. And then it will download and it will install. Now, most people would think an installation means it's installed. Well, not technically, right? You still need to reboot to complete the installation. Now, One thing I will ask, and I'll just pick on either Michael or Jeffrey here, is from your perspective, both of you can chime in. Why is patching still such a critical pillar in security? Like, why do we need to focus on it, and why does Mitek do such an amazing job in patching? Can either one of you take that one up?
For sure. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a multi-layered approach. It's going to be the attack vector that gets somebody into that environment to try to move laterally through any means they can, whether it's an email, which I know this is out of scope for this call, but if they can get that endpoint, then they can continue to do the damage and gather what they need and exfiltrate what data they care for, and then try to make some cash off of it.
Absolutely. What about you, Jeff?
Patching can be so difficult, but the importance of things being up to date, it just keeps everything, preventing people from getting in through any of the vulnerabilities that come out. It's just key. And Mitek, we try to do patching. Obviously, like you said, you can't do it once a month anymore. We do it much more often now than we used to. So as things have changed, we've tried to change with that and make adjustments to how frequently we do our patching.
Right. Awesome. Cool. Now, as you can see on the screen, there are a variety of Windows versions or Mac or Linux patch or what have you. You got Windows 7 all the way to Windows 11, and you've got a whole variety and flavors of Windows Server. Right. So ensuring Windows patch management is maintained can be complicated because there's just a lot of different things out there, right, that you need to maintain. Now, you could also be completely up to date using Windows 11 and using Server 2025. That usually is not the case in my experience. Also, what happens is, not to pick on Microsoft. I mean, obviously, they're doing an amazing job in terms of plugging these vulnerabilities with patches and maintaining patch, but oftentimes things break, right? So there is an adverse effect to patching sometimes, right? Now, Jeff or Michael, have you ever experienced an issue with a bad patch? And maybe you can explain what you did to either roll that back or pull that patch off, or how you mitigated the particular issue.
Well, I know that you can't do patching without coming across a bad patch. And I'm sure you've, in the last 25 years, had to deal with it as well. And the nice thing is, with Enable, we were able to roll back patches if we need to. And we've had to use the tool to do that. We also are, one of the things that we're proactive with and using some of the automation that Enable allows is we wait a little bit for patches that once they're released before we set that approval, because we want to check a little bit before, because usually it doesn't take very long for a patch to be released for somebody to say, oh, this broke something. So you say you have, 15 days to patch before anything is bad. We use that time wisely to try to weed out any of those things. But if we ever do push something, having that ability to roll back has always been helpful.
So those two steps, or the two takeaways here, would be really, you stage patch, first of all, right? You create these delays so that you can ensure that you're, researching and figuring out, what patches are good and maybe what patches are bad. But then also, if the patch gets installed and it does unfortunately break something like Microsoft Outlook, you're able to then roll the patch back, right? So again, this increases the service delivery of patch management, because you can do things like, worst case scenario, roll the patch back and pull it off. Michael, anything to add in?
For sure, yeah. One of the most recent times, it's probably 20 days ago or so, there was that DHCP issue that could occur. So with the patch management engine of Enable, we were able to find the scope, narrow down that scope, and also remove the patch without any really client downtime besides the reboot. But there was no massive calls and emails that were needed to be had for all that.
Understood. And that's an important takeaway as well. So what we're going to do here is obviously talk about devices are not always available. Post COVID here, even years later, we still have hybrid workforce, right? Some people work from home, some people are in the office, and some people do both, right? Like I work from home and I go into the office, right? So again, sometimes devices aren't always available. The good news is through N-central, as long as that device has an internet connection, it's able to check into the N-able console, and then obviously we can still deliver patches. Now, typical office environments may be 9 to 5, but you could be an IT department who is manufacturing, or you could be 24/7. Sometimes there's just no good time to patch, but we still need a patch, right? So it gets challenging often. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about best practices, and I'm going to go into a kind of a show and tell here. Now, I want to kind of explain in terms of automation. I'm going to go into the show and tell and actually get into it, but I do want to talk about the methodologies around approving, right? And Jeffrey touched on it, right? Like sometimes we have to create delays or we have to stage, right? But there are certain methodologies that you just want to automate patch as quickly as possible, right? Because there are things like definition updates for things like Windows Defender, or there could be a security patch because there is a CVE rating of a 9 or a 10. Basically, that means patch now, right? Like it's bad. So these are things, pardon me, these are best practices in terms of automating patch. Now, do you want to automate all of it? Well, probably not. Some things are better left to scheduling, right? Or, with Windows upgrades, you have semi-annual updates, right? 24H2, for example. That's something that you may want to revisit every 6 months. Typically, you're not installing an upgrade day one, right? There are some people who like to play fast and loose with Windows upgrades. However, they can have some adverse effects as well. Now, Jeffrey and Michael, just looking at this screen, I know you probably get into, and only because I typically recommend it, some kind of semi-auto methodology. Again, some things should be automated fully, and then some things should be more hybrid, right? Like sometimes I just need to do a check. And again, when we look at things like, Windows drivers, for example, right? Are driver updates important? Well, of course they are, right? Because it's supplying software that is either fixing or enhancing the code base around the hardware that you're using within your laptop. So, do you intend to install all of those, updates? Well, of course. But again, there can be adverse effects around things like drivers. So, and especially if you're using something like a Microsoft Surface, right? Those driver updates actually contain enhancements oftentimes, right? Like software enhancements. So these are the methodologies that MiTAC gets into around staging patch. Now, Michael or Jeffrey, can you talk a little bit about this? Like if I go back in terms of that semi-auto, how do you do it? Like, how do you create an automatic approval that has these different methodologies? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, I can. Let me start it, and I can hand it off to Michael a little bit.
Sure.
A little bit. We have patches that we automatically approve after that delay of how many ever days from when they're released. But as you indicated, we have definitions that the delay on those are like a day. Even if any time during the month, if they come out, it's set to auto approve and install within a day.
Of course.
The same with we have third-party patches as well. The browsers, we allow browsers to go anytime there's a browser update, wait a few days and then approve those. And then, Michael, we have a lot of the base Windows updates that are just automatically approving.
Correct. The other good thing is that with the patch management engine of N-able, we can still do top-down approval, but if a client has a very specific need or requirement, we can still decline a certain patch if it's going to conflict with their environment or some hardware, which helps do the top-down approach, so we're not having to go manually to every single client or machine. But yes, there is some different scope and scale we can apply to it.
That's awesome. And both of you brought up two major points, right? One, I mean, we need to be able to effectively patch the customer the way they need to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give you one of my horror stories, right? Really quick. There is a compliance requirement called ITAR. And one of my customers, an IT department that I was looking after, a very large entity, I think about 600 employees, they were doing business with the federal government of Canada. I was rebooting their servers once a week, every night at around 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, this particular entity was doing drop shipments during the time of conflict in Afghanistan. And I was taking down their server at what I thought was 3 o'clock my time, but it wasn't 3 o'clock in the morning Afghanistan time. So I caused a major issue. I obviously didn't want to, but I had to work with that team in terms of rescoping patch and getting more details so that it wouldn't affect them, right? So we have to be able to work with our customers to be able to align patching effectively. So great point on that one, Michael. And something that Jeffrey brought up that I do not want to ignore, and I didn't include in my slides, is third-party patch management. It's not just about Windows. Windows serves applications, right? So as important as our operating system is around patch management, it's also patching things like browsers that Jeffrey brought up. So patching Chrome, patching Safari, right? Patching Firefox, whatever it might be. We have to be able to patch the applications as well that we're using that's installed into the operating system of Windows. So, and that's a good thing because we do well over 100 plus at this point. And hopefully by the end of this year, I think we're going to bridge somewhere close to 300. Okay. Now, before I get into that, I do want to kind of ask one other question here. Bear with me. I just wanted to close this. There we go. I want to talk about AI and automation. You know, we're in the MSP space, so we talk about AI and automation daily, right? We live it, we breathe it, you know, those kind of things. But I want to give you, before we segue into software and demos and that, what have you, Michael and Jeff, talk to me about what you think AI and automation in 3 to 5 years is going to do for patch management. Now, I didn't run this by you before. I know I'm probably catching you a little flat-footed, but we all have, you know, some kind of enthusiasm around AI. Where do you think AI could come up and help us all around patch management? Any ideas?
So I think we still don't know. I think we're going to have a race to
prediction, like just theory craft here, like anything.
I think AI will help potentially on, I know it's going to be a little bit outside of patching, but scripting, but then we're also going to be fighting the ones that are doing it for bad. So it's going to be a little bit of a space race per se to get to the finish line first.
Understood. What about you, John?
I would really, what I'm hoping for, and I'm going to make a prediction, but I don't, who knows, the way Windows does their builds, their number builds, like what's the NTOS kernel and what is the Windows build? I'm hoping that and predicting that somebody is going to be frustrated enough by that the AI is going to be able to figure out, okay, the better way of making sure machines are updated is to use AI and scripting to find out and know what build is supposed to be what build and which kernel is this, and building in AI into addressing what is missing and what needs to go, and hopefully with the scheduling of that. That some of that stuff I would like to see happen with AI and patching.
Right, and these are all futures. Like, is it here today? No, but I think AI is going to do some wonderful things around patch management. I'll give you my prediction, right? I mean, obviously, I work for this amazing company called Enable, but we have a lot of data around patch management. So as we're modernizing N-central, and which we're doing today, and we're making things greater and greater around patch management, one of the things I think we should focus on is using AI to understand what a bad patch is and help our MSP partners around removal, right? Because we can baseline a device. We can understand how a patch is really affecting an endpoint. Is it making it latent or slower or non-performant, even blue screen? Like if I see a blue screen, okay, maybe we just patched it and I have to remove that. So those are the things, though, I think AI has a good opportunity to kind of understand what is going on with the user experience, right? So we call that DEX in monitoring terms, is digital experience monitoring. So what we can do is understand that digital experience that your customers have. And then if it's any kind of like adverse effects around the installation of a patch, let's fix that. Let's roll that back. Let's get them back in time, right? So that kind of thing. I think AI has a good opportunity around that. Now I'm going to go back to my slide here, but before I do, I actually just want to go into a demo, right? So I'm going to kind of show you how patch management works in N-central. Okay, so this is my lab environment. If I come up to the top here, you can see all my fake customers, what have you. I'm going to go down to Trey Research, and I'm going to focus on Trey Research, which is my fake lab. Okay. Now, as you can see, under configuration and patch management, I've got Linux patching, I've got Windows patching. I also have what is called device management for Apple. So that's MDM for Apple devices. So we have all three of those operating systems covered around patch management. Now, first and foremost, I'm, for all intents and purposes, going to focus around Windows, because that is the elephant out there, right? More than 96% of the devices our partners have are Windows-based, okay? Now, if I go into Windows patch management, the first thing I'm going to do is obviously configure patch. How do I do that? I come into patch management, and then I set up what is called a profile. That's a standardized patch, right? What do I want to do? Do I want to do this for laptops? Okay, so if I type laptops, let's make sure I'm typing correctly. What I can do is, announce pop-ups if I want to. Maybe I don't. Maybe I just want to turn that right off. What do I want to do? Do I want to communicate externally? What that means is, do I want that endpoint to reach out to Microsoft, or do I want it to reach out to our probe? So N-central is an agent and probe-based technology. We can use our probe software to then cache all of the patches so they're staged, ready to go at a moment's notice. So when you do install, it reaches the probe, downloads it, installs it. Now, that methodology worked very well pre-COVID when everybody was in the office. Now we have hybrid, right? So typically I set up routines where if I can't hit that probe after 5 minutes, it will just go out to Microsoft directly and download it, okay? What happens if you're coming back from vacation? Well, you need patches, right? The laptop's been off for 2 weeks or what have you. So, give them 30 minutes, cup of coffee. They turn on their laptop, they're sipping away, reading MSN. What you can do is then start installing patches right away. Now, the next 4 steps is how every patch management on the planet works, right? We need to detect. And again, I talked about that delta change around library, right? We know what's installed and we know what's available, right? That's called detection in N-central. And we set up schedules, right? Is it a 9 to 5? Is it 24/7 environment? Is it manufacturing? Those kind of things. Well, I need to be able to do those checks periodically. When do I want to download? When do I want to install, right? And then ultimately, when do I want to reboot the device? Now, this is the biggest challenge. And I harp to our MSP partners like Mitek around rebooting, right? Because I can say it's easy, but like I told you, there can be compliance requirements around some of this too, right? So you want to make sure that you're meeting your customer obligations, right? So rebooting devices when it's appropriate for them. Sometimes it's never appropriate, but you do have to find a time. And then what we do is we set it up and we forget about it, right? Because we have what are called rules in N-central. All I need to do, a filter in N-central is effectively a group. I need to find my particular group. If I do something like workstations and laptops right here, I move that over. I'm going to manage patch. I'm going to enable third-party patch. Again, we do over 100 products. And then I'm going to turn that on for tray research. And then I'm going to click next, and then it's going to tell me what I did, right? So this is basically a summary of what I've just accomplished. Now, what I do next is I then approve. How do I approve? I do it either manually, one by one. This is the library method. As you can see here, we have what is called a CVSS score. You can see that a number of these patches are immediately critical, right? You can set up rules and automation in N-central to automatically approve them if they're higher than a 9, right? Or higher than an 8 or a 7, right? So you can set up this automation, but for all intents and purposes, you can go through and manually approve a patch one by one if you wanted to. Now, if I come back, and I'll just click cancel here, we can also do it by device. Maybe I have a couple test servers or what have you that I want to install these patches on. I don't typically do this method, but you can. You can pick devices and install it that way. Or what we do is, like Jeffrey and Michael have talked about, we set up some automation, right? We want to apply patches based on schedules, based on availability, based on the classification of the patch, definition, security, third party, update upgrades, right? It's all here, right? Sometimes Microsoft even classifies patches as unknown, right? So we have to get those installed too sometimes, right? As you can see, we can choose our target. Now, for all intents and purposes, I'm just going to choose what I typically recommend for automatic patching. Critical, I will go definitions. Security, I will go update rollups and updates. Those 5 typically I try to automate at least on a weekly basis. And like Jeff said, definitions, let's do them twice a day if you wanted to, right? You can set up your own scheduling around this. And then what I do is I go down, if I am choosing third-party products, I can go down and turn any of these on, right? It's just a matter of clicking select, but they're all here. All the common off-the-shelf type software, the Dropboxes, the Opera softwares, the Chrome, the Firefoxes, they're all in here, right? And then what do I want to patch? Right? Who do I want to patch? Do I want to do a patch group or a ring? Right? I can do that. If I want to set up a particular group that has special needs around patch management, like do not reboot on weekends or what have you, I can set up that group. But then I can also come in and set up that delay that Jeffrey was talking about. Maybe I'm going to put in a 3, 4, 5 day delay so that I can ensure that I'm understanding when that patch may go bad, right? And then I give it a name, right? Microsoft patching, third-party patching, definitions, call it whatever you like. But then you've saved it, and then you have turnkey automation that you can count on to deliver patch management. Is there anything you guys want to add around that in terms of just the kind of show and tell, or something that you may focus on when you set up your configurations?
Of course, I was muted. Sorry about that.
Okay.
One of the things that we end up doing and using is we use custom properties. Enable has the ability to do custom properties. And we have you talk about the groupings, right? So we have the ability, because of what's available in N-central, we have the ability to set groups like rings or, this day, this day, this day. And we set custom properties and use that along with all the profiles that you just said. That's one of the things that we like about the power that we find inside of N-central with patching and using custom properties.
Awesome. Michael, anything to add?
I think you guys covered everything.
Cool. And like Jeffrey talked about, custom properties is really the defining way to do edge case requirements, right? Like not everybody can be patched one single way, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to have complexity, right? There's compliance requirements, reboot my device on Sundays as opposed to a Friday at 4 p.m. Like you have to be able to carve patch up in such a way that it meets your customer obligations. That's one of the great things about Mitek in terms of being able to work with their customers and really define patch the way you need them to. Okay, so that's patch management. But one thing I do want to show you is what is not available today, but is right around the corner, is Linux patch. Okay, so we have built a brand new Linux patch module. This is in a tech limited preview. So some of our partners are able to fully utilize Linux patch. But effectively, we can come in and effectively use this. We can see what patches have failed. Now, I've been patching a Linux system since I was a very young man. I can tell you very few times have I seen a Linux patch fail, but it can happen. As you can see, I don't have any in my lab, so I can't show it, but it's one of those things that it's all right here. Okay, so when you want to set up the schedules, when you want to install these particular patches, and the great thing is that you can also come in and see vulnerabilities specifically around Linux, right? So you can see what is going on across your devices with particular CVEs on Windows. And today it's Windows and Mac, and we're going to have Linux right around the corner as well in terms of our vulnerability management that is built into N-central as well. Now, obviously, I want to ask you some cool questions, right? So I did some little research, but Jeff, and because I've known Michael for well over a decade, believe it or not, and I know one of the first things I did when I met you is outline how patch management worked in N-central. So I know you know your stuff when it comes to patch management. What's the hardest type of patch to manage? Is it the OS update, third-party applications, firmware? You tell me, what is your cautionary tale around patch management, and what's the struggle? Because obviously, as we all know in IT, the struggle is real when it comes to patch management.
Yeah, I guess I'll start on this one. It's going to be based on each client. Even if you built the same server the same way, they're going to have different applications, different use cases, different hardware. Sure, it could be both 2022, 2025, but Dell, Lenovo, HP, they can all act different. I know I've seen driver updates cause Dell server probably 15 years ago decide to not function properly, super low latency or high latency, struggled with that. So it's kind of across the board. I've seen Windows patches go south from some of the security side. So again, the good thing is the patch management engine lets us address that if we start to see it at scale or even at the client perspective.
Great point. Not only do we have a Windows agent that does all the monitoring and the remote control and vulnerability management, all the other goodies that are built into the N-able N-central product, but it's the detail that we can bring around patch management and the granularity, right? And really ensure that, no matter what your customer vertical, again, manufacturing, banking, you name it, we're going to be able to kind of carve up patch management the way you need them to. Anything to add, Jeff?
I've always found that one of the hardest part of patching is the availability of machines. We've had to, over time, adjust how frequently we do things, when we do things. Do you want to patch servers every week? And will it require a reboot? If it doesn't require a reboot, how can we make it so that the server doesn't reboot weekly? Because some people don't want their servers to reboot weekly. Or laptops that are online or not online or in a bag. How do we do Wake up? Do we use Wake on LAN? All of those things have always been a struggle, and we create a lot of different options to make that struggle less difficult. Making it so that if after a certain amount of time, if it's not available, it will instead start to do it during the day instead of at night, and notifying people about that. So that's always been a struggle. At least I've found it very frustrating when trying to get patches deployed to multiple machines.
Of course.
I think the
Go ahead.
biggest struggle we always get is the reboots. So
Yes.
can it not reboot? I'd love to say yes, but just like Jason started with, it has to have a reboot for certain patches. So luckily, the prompts we can provide to the end user is great. So it does get them notifications, and then they can delay it potentially if they have to.
Awesome. And I think these are all great points, right? Like, patch can be really difficult. I've worked for organizations where they have 30,000 devices. I've worked for a small MSP, 5 techs, right? But some of our customers were hundreds and hundreds of folks, and their IT teams are run pretty thin, right? And they're doing a lot of important work or IT projects or what have you. And I know you guys do IT projects and stuff too, but obviously we want to keep on the theme of patch management. But it's one of those things where, you're trying as Mitek to address a lot of the, I call it patch fatigue, right? Because we got the automation, we got the tool sets, right? Where you're able to bring the expertise around, because you guys have been doing it for forever. Well, not as forever as old as me, but a long time.
Yep.
But easy, Jeff. But it's one of those things where using this particular software and obviously utilizing your expertise reduces that kind of patch fatigue for obviously like IT departments, right? Can either one of you kind of take this one on and talk about what does that engagement look like, right? Like, how do you carve up patch? How do you report on patch? Which I'll show you in a moment. But can you talk a little bit about that engagement, and say you're an IT team of 50 to 100, not 50 to 100 techs, but say you're 50 to 100 people, but you're a small IT team. How do you guys help out, and what does it look like?
I've got gray in my beard too, Jason. So I can call you.
I didn't want to point it out, Jeff. But.
The way we try to interact with the teams that we're working with, right? So if we have a company that comes in and says, I need help with patching, we work with them to figure out when are those times. We've talked a little bit about what that looks like. We ask them, when can you reboot? When can you not reboot? Let's talk about schedule and making sure that this doesn't do this. So we work with them to make a plan as to how that's going to look. And then we use the tools that we have in place already, right? So we've spent a lot of time setting up options and abilities to make it so that we're not sticking you in one single box, right? So you need to, this set of machines you want to do on this day, this set you want to do on this day. And we work with that company to try to figure out what is going to work best for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Anything to add, Michael?
Yeah, so patching can be complex. We can make it super crazy where we need 5 engineers to deal with it every day. So N-able allows the customization of both, but we try to stick with the best practice, top down. And like Jeff said, customize for this machine runs a laser, can't ever reboot. We'll handle the reboots. This machine runs some critical task on the shop floor. So it's just aligning the client to make sure we hear what their need is and we repeat it back. So we just didn't say, okay, I got it. And then you're like, oh, you said I could reboot it in the morning though. They're like, no. So we just try to reconfirm and design properly.
Yep.
Communication.
And obviously, that's a good opportunity for AI as well. Communication, right? I mean, we have LLMs or large language models that can talk to people, right? So that'd be a good opportunity for AI as well. But asking the employee, is this a good time to patch your device? Well, in my experience, there's never a good time to patch a device, but we have to do it, right? So if you are in a regulated environment, or if you have compliance requirements around PCI DSS or one of the many out there, it can be that we can force reboots. But typically what we want to do is ask and ask again, and maybe ask a third time. But maybe on the fourth time, basically say, okay, well, your computer's going down in the next 60 minutes. And that affords them the opportunity to at least do their own reboot when it's good for them, right? So again, we have a lot of flexibility around reboots and how to do those and what the messaging looks like, all through automation. Now, I know we have about 5 minutes or so, but I did want to get into a little bit of patch reporting because, as amazing as MyTech is and as amazing as N-Central is, well, we still need to report on this stuff. Contractually, you're saying, okay, well, we've got patches installed. What does that look like? Well, the good news is that N-Central has Power BI baked right into the UI and the interface. So what we're able to do here is if I want to come into this dashboard, I need to delete this one, but I'm just going to click on patch compliance. We are actually in the process of building a brand new patch management dashboard as well. So hopefully that will come out soon. But for now, we still have just this. Now, if you're not familiar with what superseded updates are, lucky you. But it is one of those things where definition, for example, they might come out 9 times in a single day. I've seen all sorts of weirdness when it comes to definition updates. So when you run a report and say, I want to know what patches have been installed for over 30 days, but yet there have been, let's say, 180 entries over the course of those 30 days, some updates get superseded than others, right? Because again, I'm checking 3 times a day. I'm installing the latest and greatest. So I don't need to install the older ones because it rolls up into the other definitions. So they get what is called superseded. We can report on these things though. So we can include superseded updates or we can turn that on or off. Okay. And again, because this is Power BI, I can drill right into some of this stuff. Well, why do I have no approvals? Like in my environment, I have some of this. I can show that as a table. I can even drill through and see the details around that. Well, why is B. Jolie Foods and Coastal Care Med not patching here? Well, it looks like someone in my lab environment isn't patching their devices correctly because there is no approval on some of these updates. Okay, so we can report on all of this. We know what's working. We know what's not working. And we can tell when something goes bad. And that is all done through all of this Power BI that is pre-built out of the box, ready to go for MyTech and obviously your customers. Anything you would like to point out around kind of the reporting or what that may look like?
I'll say that patch reporting is also one of the hardest things to deal with because of how kind of weird Microsoft has their builds and this and that, and
right.
What the analytics that have started to come out have been helpful for us to try to catch where those things are. Everything has gotten better over time, and we're happy to see what's happening now.
And is it? I didn't mean to cut you off if you had something to add, Michael. But how do you communicate this kind of patch compliance to your customers? Like, do you do this monthly, quarterly? When you work with other IT departments in terms of augmenting, patch management, do you send them like a report, or do you just like how does that engagement look like in just terms of like giving them peace of mind?
Right now, we're using the analytics information as much as possible to show, hey, look, we have these approved, and using it to show the truth of this didn't, right? Because you don't want to just say everything's good. You want to be honest about what it is that is there and missing. And we're either having them, if it's a co-managed IT client that we're targeting, we're having them have access to that analytics information to check, to keep us honest about what it is that we're doing. And for those that don't necessarily have access into N-able, that data gets gathered and sent out via reports on a monthly basis through some sort of an executive summary that is available to our clients. So
awesome. That's amazing. Now, obviously, we're about a quarter to the hour, so we wanted to keep this around 45 minutes. I just personally want to say I've been working with MyTech for well over a decade. You are one of the best organizations out there, and I'm not blowing smoke here. You guys are awesome. Taryn, I think that's a wrap. So thanks for having me. My name is Jason Murphy. I'm from Enable Technologies. And I really appreciate you guys inviting me and doing this webinar.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason. And like I said earlier, if any of viewers were watching this on demand later on our YouTube, feel free to leave any comments. We are happy to get back to you or forward your questions on to Jason. So again, yeah, thank you so much, Jason, and we'll see you guys next time.
Awesome.
Thank you. Bye.